Our gospel train is coming, I hear it just at hand.
American slavery was the source of countless tragedies. The songs of the slaves from this terrible injustice perpetuated by the early European settlers is the subject of this 4-part series at Hughbass.com. Let's dive into episode 2 of the Sorrow Songs and their impact on American music. The Sorrow Songs' connections to modern genre is a key element. There is a pattern of response to the songs that can explain how white faces became representatives of popular American music originating from black artists. As these transgressions expose the obvious moral depravity fueled the closet abolitionist reactions that are mirrored in the public sphere even to this day. Cruz, the sociologist mentioned in episode 5, notes the example of Mary Boykin Chestnut, a white woman with abolitionist leanings and wife to a slave owner. Chestnut records in her journal after being in the presence of a black religious gathering, of the bitter tears she weeps after witnessing a ceremony she claims took place without words and had no meaning at all. Cruz goes on to say, meaningless does not engender such deep pathos. Profoundly meaningful emotions, however, are difficult to render into words, for meaning encompasses language but is not reducible to it. Chestnut would meet this potent response to soul singing by doing what many abolitionists did to cope with opposing the horrors of slavery while still having a desire to participate in its opposition. In her own words, the best way to take Negroes to your heart is to get as far away from them as possible. This act of engaging in the emancipation of enslaved black Americans from a distance was not unique, as many anti-slavery Northerners and Republic Free Soilers found the ability to be critical of the institution while avoiding confrontation of the actual people suffering under its bonds. The Sorrow Song enlists, and likely is the genesis for, the white American tradition of appropriating black music culture as a means of profit in recognition of its powerful message while dismissing the heartbreak of its origins. Nastasia Vonovskaya, Bay Area journalist, writes, even though Elvis Presley got all of the credit for being the king of rock and roll, it was Big Mama Thornton who first performed Hound Dog, and Otis Blackwell who wrote several of his other big hits. These more modern examples highlight the authenticity transmitted through the language and narrative of the black song, embroidered in disenfranchisement and oppression, while being packaged in a white face, then handed to an audience detached from its foundations. The listener knows there is a moving story being told, but is disconnected from the hardship of its placement. The Sorrow Songs were a name given to the musical compositions that spoke of the suffering of enslaved Africans in the United States. It exposed what W.E.B. Du Bois called the veil, or the psychological manifestation of the color line that prevents whites as seeing black people as Americans and from treating them as fully human. The reactions to this music are the narrative that would follow the generations of bold creativity to follow. It became the basis by which America would define its musical voice. Cruz would describe this as the strategy of comprehension and appropriation, defining this function by embracing the subject of black music, but not the black subjects from whom this music comes. While post-Civil War ethics would continue this trend of distancing from the content of black music while appropriating its narrative, it would not be long before the white embrace of black culture would shift trends the other way. Jazz would be its minstrel. Milton Mezz Mezzrow was one such white bohemian that would cultivate jazz music to distance himself from the dominant white society rather than that of the voices oppressed by them. In the jazz of New Orleans, New York, and Chicago, white musicians found an avenue to escape the conformity of white society and gain closeness to the subjects of its origins, rather than distance to avoid the harshness of the realities for black American poverty and continued segregation oppression. Mezzrow's commentary on jazz was that it embraced a collectively improvised nose-thumbing at all pillars of all communities, one big syncopated Bronx cheer for the righteous squares everywhere. Black music, in this case, would be the force that would bring permeations in Du Bois' veil, and the proliferation of jazz would allow the evolution of its genres to come. The sorrow songs express a powerful and undeniable truth of the grievous wrong embroidered in the American story. When heard, their powerful message invokes the deepest and guttural sadness for who, when confronted with the massive blemish that American slavery is, could deny its injustice. As America continues to be baffled by solutions, music continues to express the incomprehensible atrocity. The passion and joy of freedom would sound greater than any heard before it when sprung from the heart of those who know what it means to be enchained. Elation of progress could only be so truthfully exclaimed by those who know what a long road there is to travel. These expressions are what make black music so powerful and white artists so attracted to its message. This is admittedly a very binary point of view, and it is not so simple as two sides of a coin, but the history of how these two groups navigate the veil of the color line would be the defining characteristics of how America continues to develop its musical identity. Jazz and recorded sound would be an important chapter of how America would culturally traverse its ideals, and the immediate aftermaths would burst onto television, radio, and eventually the internet, creating a world stage of impressive iconic artistry. We will explore this further next time, but for now, here is our old friend Mezzrow and Sidney Blanchett in the listening example Tommy Blues from 1947. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more great music history at Hughbass.com.